Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Curriculum and Instruction Committee meeting for October 13th, 2021. And Dr. Cuppett, is there any public comment?
At this time, there's no public comment.
All right, very good. The board did receive an email from a world language teacher that I think will probably need to be looked at by curriculum. Brought up an interesting suggestion.
Yes, ma'am. We're aware of that.
Very good. Thank you. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes will stand approved. Ms. Johnson, Mr. Johnson, any comments before we get into our presentations? All right, and we are ready to go. Dr. Cuppett, take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Today we have an update from our social studies curriculum specialists. If they can go ahead and start sharing their presentation while I do an introduction, that would be great. So Colleen Bernard is our secondary specialist for social studies, and Kim Day is our elementary curriculum specialist for social studies. We have a couple of relevant updates today. This is part of our annual updates that we do to the board as we rotate through our different content areas. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Colleen Bernard and Kim Day. And James is working on full presentation of the slideshow at this point. James, it looks like it needs to go into present mode. Is that functioning okay? Please pause for technical difficulties. Kim, Kim, are you going first?
I'm going first. I'm talking to James. He's in the cube next to me. He says it's only giving him the one option and this is it.
Okay, so then he can just toggle through the slides then.
So I think it's pretty big, I think.
Yeah, I think it'll be good enough. So why don't you go ahead and go and just tell him to toggle down the slides.
Okay, so I think that's going to work, James. Thank you. Okay, so all right, he tried several times. I think this is what we're going to have for right now. So, okay, all right, so we're on slide 1. Thanks. All right, so good morning, everyone. I'm here to give you a update on our elementary social studies curriculum. Our work over the last year and a half has been to provide social studies blueprint units for Schoology. These blueprints are an off-the-shelf resource for teachers to use for planning and implementing of lessons. We've done several iterations of these blueprints as we've gone from full virtual to concurrent teaching and now back to face-to-face instruction. But no matter what model of instruction we're doing, the elementary social studies blueprints include both teacher and student-facing resources, embedded mind-brain education strategies, narrated slideshows to increase accessibility for students, formative assessments, and ELA integration opportunities. We received feedback from teachers that our Schoology blueprints were easy to use and helpful in their planning. In this year's blueprints, we are building the face-to-face learning opportunities back in, but we are also taking advantage of the instructional technology that we found most useful while teaching virtually and keeping those options available as well. This will allow us to pivot to another instructional model if necessary and will also support our teachers and students in the blended virtual program. Okay, James seems to have disappeared.
That's all right. I'll try to share it right now, Kim. Go ahead and keep going.
Okay. So our goals this year were to simplify, minimize changes, and provide clear focus areas for teachers. Our focus areas for elementary social studies are teaching priority standards, disciplinary literacy, and integration with ELA. These will remain the focus areas for the coming years as well. Identifying the priority standards will better accommodate individual school schedules and increase teacher flexibility to meet the needs of their students. There are 5 overarching domains in social studies instruction: civics, people and nations of the world, geography, economics, and history. In each grade level, priority standards were identified for each of the 5 domains, ensuring a comprehensive social studies program. In addition, we prioritized social studies standards that support social emotional learning and align with our PATHS and health curriculum. This will eliminate lesson redundancy for teachers. Finally, we reviewed the current elementary social studies essential curriculum and compared it with the new MSD framework that was released in June of 2020 to help us identify priority standards for each grade level. So our blueprints have these priority standards and are built around them. Our disciplinary literacy goal is for students to engage in inquiry and use the skills and processes of social studies to learn the content. We want our students thinking like historians. We want them using primary and secondary sources to gather evidence, to make claims, and construct arguments. We want them to be asking questions and, of course, getting excited to be in school learning about social studies. We heard from our teachers that they want more support with ELA and social studies integration. We are collaborating with the ELA team to identify instructional text which can be used in both ELA and social studies instruction. We will also identify ELA standards in our social studies reading and writing assignments, which will provide possible data and student evidence to support the ALP process in reading comprehension and writing. James, next slide, or whoever's doing, Kevin, thank you. So Kevin, I think we are on slide, we should be on my second slide. So one more. Perfect, thank you. MSDE released a new social studies framework in June of 2020. However, we made the decision to delay implementation until the school year of 2022. We wanted to ensure minimal changes for teachers this year so they could maximize their time face-to-face with students. We believe that this is in the best interest of both teachers and students at this time. However, the work in transitioning to the new framework has begun. First, we conducted an alignment of our current essential curriculum with the new MSDE framework. This prepared us for curriculum writing work with teachers, in which we drafted a new essential curriculum that aligns with the MSDE framework. A team of grade 3 through 5 teachers was able to dig into this new framework by analyzing each instructional indicator. We grouped the indicators into units and wrote compelling and essential questions to guide instruction. The team also identified resources that we currently use, that we can continue to use with the new standards, and where new resources need to be curated or purchased. All of this work is ongoing. Next slide, please. These are the next steps in our process. We are currently putting finishing touches on the draft of the new essential curriculum. The elementary and secondary social studies teams and representatives from the Equity Office will review the draft essential curriculum and revise. This will ensure we have a systemic coherence in our social studies program pre-K through 12 and have addressed our equity priorities. We will continue to evaluate and curate new resources aligned to the drafted essential curriculum. In the spring, we look forward to bringing the new elementary social studies essential curriculum to the Board of Education for approval. And then during summer curriculum writing, we will develop the units and Schoology Blueprint resources for implementation in school year 2022-23. We will also develop professional learning for teachers as necessary. Thank you.
Do we have any I'm sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
That's exactly, I was going to say, before we get to secondary, it seems like a good place to stop. And I'll jump in. I usually defer to my colleagues, but I'll jump in here. I love that you said, get excited. You know, I love history, and Tudor England was just one of the ones I was fascinated. Took a college course and was bored to tears. And I had a lot of background knowledge. And then I've taken other classes. I took history of country music, history of the South and history of country music, 2 different courses. And that professor just made it come to life. And I think the stories, it's all about the stories. And to me, it was the idea that minute events can change history. And, you know, I've listened to podcasts. There's an 1865 one that's just fascinating, and books about Lincoln's assassination. And you hope it's going to turn out differently, even though you know it's not. But it can be so exciting and so interesting. And that's what I hope our teachers are doing. I always tried to integrate. I would have loved to have taught more social studies, but always integrated with language arts because it's such a natural pairing and the stories can be so compelling. So I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah, and very good. Simplify, minimize changes. Yes, always good. I know the teachers appreciate that. One thing, and when I did teach 5th grade social studies, common good was one of the big concepts that was talked about. I just wonder, is that in there still?
It is currently in our curriculum, and it is in the new MSD framework as well.
Because that was one of the ones that constantly comes back to me as we're going through this pandemic, that the founding fathers, while liberty and freedom were immensely important, the common good was often built into the Constitution in many ways. So I'm glad that is still there. Thank you. Mr. Johnson, Ms. Johnson, any questions?
I do. I see here that we're aligning the content or making it so that it is possible to be incorporated or designed to be used with the blended virtual learning. But I'm wondering, to what extent are we doing to have like a core set of content like in Schoology that's already there, so that students who, for whatever reason, might not be at school can have access to that content. So it's not just blended virtual, but classroom-based students having access to as much content as possible. What efforts are we making in that regard?
Great. So all of our curricular resources are populated in Schoology. That is the primary way that the teachers are accessing all curriculum for all students. So everything is built out in Schoology for them, from slideshows that are also narrated. Myself and my teacher specialist narrate each and every slideshow. So in case a student is absent, if a teacher has posted that slideshow into Schoology, they could click on if they can't read it, they can click on it and they will hear my voice or my teacher specialist voice reading the slide to them, so that all students have access to these curricular resources, regardless of whether they're in face-to-face or not. It is up to their teacher to post them in Schoology for them.
Oh, okay, then just as a follow-up, policy-wise, what are we doing to help ensure that the content is there for students?
Policy from a board policy perspective, or are you talking like just a direction to schools, Ms. Johnson?
A direction. I wouldn't see that being a board issue of ensuring that students have access to content even on days they might not be there.
Yeah, so
it's an operational decision.
Yeah, Dr. Alavito and the instructional directors have directed schools to make sure that teachers are placing materials and resources into Schoology for students who are in quarantine. As part of that, in addition, there are some other resources and materials that the curriculum department has provided. And then, of course, the check-ins with the tutoring are the 3 main ways that we're doing that. And so the reason Ms. Day is pointing out that the teacher would have to curate that, we could simply push all of our social studies content directly into teachers' courses and make that visible to students. But that would be so overwhelming for students to see all of these resources in there. They would have a difficult time finding them. And so the way Schoology works is the teacher curates and pushes out things to students when they need them, so that they're the number of things that they're engaging with from a cognitive load perspective are reduced. And so teachers can publish and unpublish. So in a teacher's view, just like in Blackboard, you may have all of these resources in there, but for a particular unit or for a particular period of time, they may only publish so many visible to students. And so that's the way that we would have students navigate the Schoology environment. And that's based on the teacher publishing and unpublishing items. But from a curriculum perspective, we have those available for teachers.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Mr. Johnson, any questions?
Yes, I want to start by saying, hi, Kim. Good to see you. Kim and I work together.
Good to see you. Good to see
Yeah.
you. It's always nice.
Yes. I wanted to thank you for sharing, and I really listened to some key points there. I really glad to hear that there's a focus on making them historians. I think really taking it from a professional standpoint is always going to be great with any content we do. I think that's wonderful. I also was glad to hear that there's a crossover with LA. And I wanted to know, is there currently or in the future any STEM crossovers coming?
Yeah, I work very, very closely with the curriculum specialist for ELA, Jen Ralston, and we are, as we're both working on our blueprints for coming years, we currently have some integration. We're going to increase that integration as we build out both of our curriculums to align across the year, so that there will be a very distinct and easy to follow integration for teachers.
Okay. And will that also go over into like science and technology? A lot of times I feel like even though they're encouraged to, teachers in those areas don't get to go into the history of their area.
Absolutely. So one, I think the benefits of I am very, very familiar with the science curriculum, as you probably know, Mr.
Yes,
Johnson.
indeed.
And so it is, and I'm also in charge of STEM. So it's very easy for me to make the crossovers into other content areas. I'm very much a generalist in that way. So
Okay.
oftentimes if we have data to look at in social studies, there's data to look at in social studies. We can tie in math skills. It's easy for me to make the science connections, especially when it comes to careers in science or technology. That's a big crossover with science and social studies, is looking at how technology has impacted our world and how we live in it. So there's definitely ways to integrate. And I make a lot of integration with health, because a lot of our civics, especially at the lower levels, are about getting along with people. And a lot of the health standards also align with that. So there's quite a few overlapping standards that we are making they're identified very easily in our resources. So teachers go, oh, if I'm doing that, because there's not enough time in the day, we all know that. So if they say, all right, I'm doing this in social studies or this in health, I'm doing a double duty right here, because these standards line up and are very, very similar. So we're building out resources that teachers can maximize their time in that way, and integration is the way to do that.
And then one last question. I just wanted to see with the, you mentioned with the integration you're doing with the new curriculum from MSTE, and those touch points you're looking at, what was similar and phasing that in. What do you see as the biggest change with the new stuff you got coming in?
So our current curriculum, that is also aligned with previous MSCE standards, really stops in the 4th and 5th grade. They do it's American history focus, but it really stops at Civil War currently. The biggest change I see coming is that it is now more of a touch point. We're not covering all of American history, because you could never do that in 4th and 5th grade in half of a year each year. But it moves us into the 20th century. So now we'll be looking at big ideas of civil rights, for instance, that is not covered in our current curriculum. So that's the biggest change, is that you look at some more, they're actually historical, but moving them into the 20th century look. So
Okay. Thank you.
it's a huge change, and it will require a lot of new resources and professional learning for our teachers.
Heavy sigh, but it sounds like an interesting change. And I had one last quick question. Could you just describe, you said mind-brain education is embedded. Could you just give us a couple of examples?
So a lot of times we, especially when we have limited time like we do in elementary social studies. I know, Ms. Yoho, you are very familiar with the limited amount of time we have. And so a lot of times, we are only teaching a standard over one lesson, essentially. And so how do you know that your kids, your students are retaining that information? So we incorporate kind of review activities for them to be able to recall the information from previous lessons so that they can then connect it to the next lessons. So those types of strategies that help kids to internalize their learning and really, really remember it, we've incorporated those throughout as ideas. We give teachers ideas about how to have their kids recall some of that information. Other types of strategies might be just, strategies to help kids remember, like giving them specific ways to tackle the information. So there's lots of different mind-brain education strategies that you can use. They call them mind-brain education strategies. They're not that new, Ms. Yoho. Like, like they're things that good teachers do. We're trying to make sure that all teachers are doing them by embedding them within.
Thank you. Yes, I was lucky enough to attend one of the pre-COVID, one of the training sessions from the Mind Brain Education School there and from Montgomery County, and it was fascinating. Really made me want to go back and teach for a little bit, but anyway.
Yeah. So we're excited about those. I think that they're really excellent strategies that work across for all kids. They're beneficial for them to learn these types of strategies, and for us to embed them within our curriculum. Helps our teachers to remember to do them.
Very good. Thank you so much. All right. I think we're, unless there's anything else, sounds like we're ready to go into secondary.
All right.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Colleen Bernard, the Curriculum Specialist for Secondary Social Studies. Thank you for having me here to do these updates on the Secondary Social Studies program. So first up is the reformulation of grades 6th and 7th curriculum. Prior to this year, the state has already reformulated and put out changes in curricular frameworks for American Studies 1, American Studies 2, American Government, and Modern World History. And those comprise grades 8 through 11 in our secondary program. Now the state is looking at grades 6 and 7, which we currently teach as in 6th grade Ancient World History, and in 7th grade Medieval World History through early modern times. So it looks like the state has a work group, and we actually have 2 teachers that are serving on that work group, and we will be hosting that work group here in FCPS at the SDC on October 28th. As part of that work, the work group has determined the direction that they want to take the curriculum for the courses in 6th and 7th grade, and it looks like they want to go into a regional studies, geographically lensed direction with a historical foundation. So I think that the courses that we have, at least in structure, we can meld in order to align with what the state's going to do in the adoption of those new standards when they eventually come to us. Speaking of that, right now, it's going to take about a year for the state to actually create the frameworks and those standards. And so we expect to see those standards as supervisors next fall for vetting. And then they would go to the State Board of Education in the spring of 2023. We would likely not get them until summer 2023, which would be just too soon for a turnaround, obviously, that fall. We would take that year of 23 to 24 to work on those standards and to align our 6th and 7th grade courses and curate the resources that we need and bring those standards to the board for approval in the spring of 24 for those fall courses, to those new courses for 6th and 7th grade to run in the fall of 2024. The text we currently have in place in 6th and 7th grade, when we decided to purchase a text a number of years ago, I opted to go with the full text instead of cutting it off. So we have a text in place that's literally from dirt till now. So that text is written by National Geographic. It's an exceedingly high quality text. They continually update their online content to support that text. So I do believe that we have a high quality resource that is malleable enough to whatever direction the state determines to go for 6th and 7th grade. Next, James is going to talk to us a little bit about the blueprint courses that we have in Schoology.
Hello everyone. My name is James Hines. I am the teacher specialist for secondary social studies. During the summer of 2020, we developed a basic footprint for all of our social studies core courses in Schoology with both teacher-facing lessons as well as student-facing materials. These lessons and units attended to the 508 compliance for online accessibility, SEL, social emotional learning, mind-brain education strategies, such as interleaving and retrieval grids, as well as incorporating disciplinary literacy throughout. In summer 2021, we expanded those resources for the courses by creating formative assessments for both content as well as disciplinary literacy in each core course. We've received plenty of positive feedback from teachers that the courses have been both helpful as well as intriguing, a great starting point for teachers in constructing their units and lessons. And we will continue to develop those into the future.
Next, turning to state assessments. So MCAP, government, or MCAP, American Studies 1 or United States History, the early part is our 8th grade MCAP assessment that is going to be field tested and scheduled for this May. They had originally intended to field test that actually 2 years ago, and then it got pushed back a year, and then of course with COVID it got pushed back another year. So we do anticipate that field test happening this May. MCAP government, which is formerly known as the Government High School Assessment, as I'm sure you know that in May of this year, the State Board of Education voted to make this an end of course exam versus one required for graduation. This one where they have to pass in order to graduate. This year, all students have to sit for the assessment, the first administration of which is going to be in January. Second will be in May. At this point, bridge projects are no longer necessary because we're going to this end of course situation with the assessment. It looks like they've settled on those end of course assessments being 20% of the overall course grade, but the state is still working on the logistics about scoring and turnaround time. So when we have more information, we'll be happy to share it. Moving on to expanding our electives for high school. So our next slide. So lots of work going on in the secondary social studies office when it comes to making sure that our students are represented in our curriculum and have opportunities to take deep dives into content of their choosing. The first is our Black and African American Studies course. We've provided a course description for you today that we're asking for you to review and move forward for us. We're asking the board to move this description forward so that the course can run in the fall of 2022. Standards are going to follow in the spring of this year, as they normally would, once the team finalizes their work. We currently have a team of 8 teachers working on the development of those standards. This summer, we ran a summer workshop with teachers, and we fleshed out the course structure, the course philosophy, which is embodied in the description that we provided to you. We've also fleshed out the units, the essential questions, abstracts for each of the units, and we're working on the course content now, which we will then translate into course standards. So we're continuing that work. We expect that work to conclude by the end of January. I'll finalize standards in February, and they'll come to CNI in March, and then hopefully to the board for approval in April. We'll also be bringing any text resources for support of that course with it, and the group is also vetting texts and curating resources as they construct the course. Next up is a women's history course, which we'll be constructing as a high school elective for students. The work for this course will begin this school year, in fact, later this fall, with the bulk of the course design taking place next summer, summer of 2022. We expect the standards for that course to be ready for the board in spring of 2023. And we hope to be able to follow the same process of bringing the course description forward and then the standards to be finalized. The course build is funded as part of our ESSER grants. So that's very exciting as well, to be able to use that funding to help support instruction about women in history. Revisions to courses. So we have a pretty broad catalog of elective courses in the social studies, and we're really looking at bringing our courses, our elective courses, up to date. In particular, we're picking off both sociology and law and society. I have work groups working on both of those this fall. We're going to bring sociology current with the national standards for the American Sociological Association. So that group is looking to align our course content with those national standards. And actually, to use those national standards, I should say, as a guide, not to align to them, but use them as a guide. And then the Law and Society course is also getting an update to bring that course current. It's been over a decade since Law and Society has been updated, and that's just the broad curriculum. That's not to say that our teachers don't update it. Of course, I've taught, and I updated it every time. And actually, while I was teaching it, often updated based on what was going on in jurisprudence at the time. Curating resources for all of our courses. We're continuing to curate resources for each of our courses using open educational resources in the public domain, as well as online subscription databases, again, to ensure that our students can see themselves in the resources that are being used to teach the curriculum. Facilitating cross-county collaboration. Through the use of Schoology, we've created sandboxes for our teachers to share resources and materials with one another. We hope to grow this portion of our resources to help support teachers, especially teachers that are singleton elective course teachers. Sometimes that can be really isolating. So we're hoping to use the Schoology platform to help with that cross-county collaboration. Teachers organically do that anyway, but we're hoping to host on the platform in the sandbox those resources. And then extracurriculars. Not that they went away last year, but they were virtual, and there is something about having the students back in person that just warms our educational hearts. So we have, I'm actually going to ask James to give us updates on the Maryland General Assembly PAGE program and the National History Day program. And then I'm going to jump back in with the rest of our secondary social studies programming.
So yes, the Maryland General Assembly PAGE program is a program that we have continuously worked with. Last year we did it virtually, and we are still waiting on information from the legislature about the structure of how the program will run this year. We're hoping to receive information within the next few weeks and get that information out to our schools so that we can get some candidates for that program. The next extracurricular is National History Day, and we're hoping to rebuild the program this year. It's in person at Hood College at this point, scheduled for March the 12th. Registration is currently open and will continue until January the 14th of 2022.
Model UN is back in person. This past Saturday, October 9th, we held our in-person orientation at Frederick High School. We had a little over 80 students actually attend the orientation. And like I said, it just makes our heart happy to see the kids in person. And a lot of the reason they show up is they get to select their committee they get first dibs on their committee and their country. And so as their numbers, their registration numbers were called, we had to say, no, let's not flat out run to the media center to get our countries. So that was really super exciting for us to see. We actually have 144 students currently registered, and it's still early in the registration process. Students have until November 8th to register for our Model UN program, which will be held at Hood College on January 8th. The topics for this year are going to include, we always try to be timely. So like our World Health Organization committee is going to be delving into vaccine equity in developing countries. Our Human Rights Council is looking at the protection of NGO activists around the world. The African Union Committee is looking at population growth, food insecurity, and the desertification in Africa. We actually have an all Spanish committee. I want to give a shout out to Bethany Brown Hardwick over at Oakdale High School. She runs this committee for us. It's conducted all in Spanish, and they're looking at the refugee issues in Central and South America. Mock trial. Registration is open for teams, and we're planning an in-person program. We're currently working out the logistics on location. Normally, we would have that program in the courthouse. That may or may not be an option for us. Like I said, we're still working on that. I don't want to speak for the courthouse yet because we haven't finalized anything. Trials are going to begin, no matter what, in January with playoffs in March. Frederick County Association of Student Councils. We held our first middle school General Assembly in September. It was a small but mighty group, and that was exciting. And then last week on October 4th, we held a full General Assembly in person. Again, it was wonderful to see the students in person and see them interacting and excited about student government and their voice in our county system. And then, yes, woohoo, middle schoolers, you're right, Tom. We look forward to the General Assembly GA on December 2nd, which will actually be here in the boardroom. And that's always that December GA is when our student member of the board candidates give their candidate speeches. So we look forward to that and certainly welcome board members to attend. And then finally, the student member of the board, actually, I have the application sitting in my email that I had to take a look at. And then that should go out in the next week or so. Pardon me. And we look forward to another great field of candidates for this year's election. What questions do you have?
Well, I just have to say, I'm sitting here so excited. What wonderful opportunities, and having attended of those only Model UN, and just being amazed by the caliber of the students. When anybody starts speaking ill of modern generation, I'm like, you need to, I want to be these kids when I grow up. They have so much more poise and world knowledge and presence than I certainly did. And I'm trying to be that. So very, very exciting. So happy that these opportunities are getting back. And I've written down dates, and hope you'll send reminders to us so that we can try to attend some of those, because it's just fascinating. And I'm going to channel President Mason. He texted me this morning. He was very excited because, in case the other board members don't know, one of the ways this might have come about anyway, the state's moving this way, but President Mason just said, hey, what can we do, to get more diversity into our social studies? And Colleen and the social studies department just ran with it. And so he's just super excited. He would have loved to have been here. I'm sure he'll be watching the video of the meeting. But it just shows what, people trying to do the right thing for students can accomplish. The women's history, and I know it'll just expand. We hear from people of various ethnic backgrounds, and I know this is just the first of many courses because people like to learn about themselves, who they are, and I like to learn about other people as well. So it hits both of those. So just very exciting. Really no questions at this point, but thank you so much for all the work you do and making it so interesting and exciting. Ms. Johnson, Mr. Johnson?
I'll just jump in to say, yeah, it's very invigorating to listen to all the exciting work going on with respect to our curriculum in this area. So thank you. I don't know if we say it enough, but thank you for everybody's hard work.
Thank you.
Hi, I just want to say thank you all for presenting today. Thank you so much. Great to hear about what's happening, what you guys are working on, and I'm thrilled that you're able to get your students, back in person for those extracurricular activities. That sounds wonderful. The Model UN and the mock trial. The kids really enjoy those things, so I'm glad to have those, and those will build our future leaders in those regards. So that's really cool. Wanted to ask about the courses you're doing with the African American Studies and the Women's Studies. I wanted to think about diversity of thought on this one. I wanted to ask, in the development of those courses, are we looking at subject matter experts outside of Fcps, like universities or leaders in the field, or do we have guest speakers in the courses? If not, I really want to see, are we reaching out to get, to the African American Museum in DC? Are we pulling in outside thought processes for these courses?
Yes, absolutely. We're working with Dr. Terry Scott at Hood College. She is the department chair of the history department there. She is also an author and an expert in the field, and she's been helping to support our build of the course since the summer. We're also looking at, even though we are looking at a basal text for the course, we're also really wanting this course and actually the build out of any of our
studies or.
I'm sorry.
Which course were you speaking of? I'm sorry.
The Black and African American History course. That's the one that's currently under construction. So I'm going to speak to that one. The Women's History course is not. We haven't begun the construction of that course yet.
Okay.
I plan to follow a similar pattern to the construction of that course as this one. So we want these courses to be very heavy in primary sources so that we can provide a depth and breadth of the content for the courses, multiple perspectives in that. And like I said, Dr. Scott has been working with us on that.
Wonderful. And then I know we recently formed a partnership with the art committee. Yes, looking to build the historical site downtown for Frederick County, African history. Are we partnering with them on the course as well, or are they going to have some kind of like cameo appearance during the course time?
Well, we've worked with ARCH. They have an education subcommittee that's an education committee in their organization. And we've worked with them actually in consultation on our core courses, because this content can't just live in this elective course that some students may or may not choose to take. Mm-hmm. This content needs to live as our history. And so they've been working in consultation with us. And remember, we just rolled out the American Studies 2 standards last year, going into the COVID year. And so, we're working to, as they curate their archival information, to be able to find places in our curriculum to pull that over and embed it in our curriculum. As far as this course, we want to get the structure of the course constructed, and we absolutely do want to incorporate the local history, because when students can see themselves not only in the course but in their own community, it roots them in their communities, and giving them that historical perspective of who walked on this ground and what happened to those people, can really give us a sense of community where we build our communities up.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate, again, as Ms. Johnson said, just all the work everybody's doing and keeping it so student focused. So thank you very much. I think we're ready for blended virtual programs, Dr. Cuppet.
Dr. Cuppet, are you able to present? Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Right now, I'm just trying to see if it'll come up, Tom.
Sounds
Are you
good.
guys seeing that? I don't think you're seeing the actual presentation, are you?
Not yet.
Interesting. Looks like, how's that, Tom? Is that better?
I'm not seeing it yet.
Okay, we're going to go to the backup plan, which is to...
It was kind of cranky this morning, as we all know, as I was trying to.
Google and Microsoft always do not play well together in the sandbox, and there's lots of reasons for that. Let's try this. Tom, do you want to go ahead and do an introduction?
Sure. Thank you so much. Ms. Yoho, Ms. Johnson, Mr. Johnson, great to be here with you all. Dr. Cuppet, I believe Dr. Harris and Dr. Alavito are in the house as well, so I appreciate them being here. The real stars of this show are going to be the 3 principals of the BVP program. So I will be turning that over in a minute, but I wanted to give just a little bit of overview and maybe a little bit of history. And this meeting so far has been very exciting to me because as a former social studies teacher, it was really invigorating hearing all of the things that are going on in social studies. Mr. Vetter may share some of his background in social studies later as well. So you got some social studies people here that are pretty excited. Mike, are you a former social studies teacher too? No. All right. So with us today are really 3 stars. Kate Kreitz, who is the elementary blended virtual program principal, Frank Vetter, middle school blended virtual program principal, and Mike Watson, blended virtual program principal, as well as, and not to be confused with, the virtual school principal as well. We are here this morning to give you a little bit of an update. We are very excited about the things that we are doing, and we also want to share some challenges that we've been facing. So with that in mind, the FCPS blended virtual program serves K through 12 students currently, and over 1,200 of them, in fact. We do serve them 180 days, and they are following a similar schedule to their home school or the traditional either elementary, middle, or high school. FCPS students are in the blended virtual program are instructed in the curriculum of FCPS. Students attend live classes daily and have interaction with their teachers daily. Students still remain in their home schools and have access to extracurricular activities at their home school when appropriate. So that's a big overview. And then when Kevin is able to bring it up, there's some data that we would like to share, and I'd like to shout out to Jen Bingman and her team for providing this to us. And I also want to put a caveat that this data is fairly current, but if you'll notice, some of this data was collected in mid-September, so the principals could update this data if it's significantly changed. And my understanding, the middle school program is not significantly changed. So,
Tom, I think I'm back online. So I'm on the slide that says program enrollment.
Awesome. So this gives you the sense of the projected enrollment that we had, and then the actual numbers that are current. And our principals will be able to tell the story behind the scenes of why the numbers are the way they are in a moment when we give them a chance to talk. And then the next slide, I think it's very interesting because of the history here. Just take you briefly back with the blended virtual program. We believe this is a pearl of the pandemic. And as we were thinking in the spring that we would be in a very much a different place as school opened, that the pandemic was waning and we were going to be, potentially having kids return in an environment that did not have the Delta variant. We still wanted to have a blended virtual program because there were certain students at each of our levels that thrived in the virtual environment. So the intent of this program was to provide opportunities for parents to select their students to be part of a blended virtual program who may want to continue in that process. With that being said, obviously the Delta variant, came, and we were able to respond I think pretty well to the additional requests. However, there are still some students on the waiting list. But as a result, it's very interesting, this data to me as you unpack it, because these are parents who self-selected this program, and they either mirror or are a little bit more than what our demographics for the system are. So I thought it's pretty interesting data for us to look at. And then without further ado, I want to turn it over to Ms. Kreitz first, and she's going to talk a little bit about the development of this program. And I can't thank these principals and their staff more than for all the work they did, because in June, this program didn't exist. And on the first day of school in August, it did. And the work that they went through to get this up and running, and there are people on the screen who were certainly supportive of that, and I'm very appreciative of them as well. But the principals really were the people who really lifted this program along with their staff, and the teachers are really doing a great job. So without further ado, I want to turn this over to Ms. Kreitz. And then Ms. Kreitz, if you'll hand it off to Mr. Vetter when you're finished, and then Frank, if you'll hand it off to Mike when she's done. So Ms. Kreitz.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see everyone. I certainly love the opportunity to brag a little bit about our program. I'm certainly proud of the work that we've done. I am a problem solver, and we've had some problems and some bumps along the way. And so I feel like that's been helpful to have a group of problem solvers and a group of innovators to get this program up and running. You can probably see the picture there. Those are some celebrations that we've had along the way. We definitely have had a good time getting materials out to our students, because they're in a virtual environment. They still do need some hands-on, especially our younger learners need those hands-on resources and those manipulatives to help them be engaged throughout the day with their teachers who are on the other side of a screen. So one of our big celebrations is that we have had 4 different material distributions. The first 2 we did do in person, where we asked the parents to come to a location and pick up resources. The first one was before school started, and we did that over at TJ Middle School, where we distributed Chromebooks to any families that needed them. We also distributed schedules and an All About Me letter from their teachers. We did have about 65% of our families attend that first distribution of materials, and so we were happy with that. What we did with the families that didn't attend is we packaged all those materials up and sent them over to homeschools, and families picked them up there. Dr. Cuppett and his team are part of the team as well, helping us get all those resources and materials out. So the second distribution we did over at Deer Crossing Elementary, and we handed out art supplies, PE supplies, more manipulatives for math, a variety of different language arts tools for our students. And again, that was where parents came to Deer Crossing and picked up materials. That was a little less, a few less families attended that. We had about 50% of our families came to the second in-person distribution. And again, we packaged up the extra stuff and handed them out to homeschools. So we looked at our data, and we realized that parents want the resources and materials, but not all of them are available to come and pick them up. So our last 2 distribution of materials, we spent several days getting those ready, packaging them up, worked with the warehouse, and sent out resources to families that way to all of the homeschools, and then families will be going there to pick them up. We sent out some science materials with our third distribution. We sent some soil and some beans and some pods for students to be able to plant some seeds and watch them grow at home. So we were excited about that. Moving on to a few other celebrations. Tom Saunders said we were the superstars. Actually, it's all the people behind us that are the superstars. We could not do this without our team. Not only our team at our our administrative team at our building level, but also I'm a co-principal. So the superstars behind me are my principals back in the buildings of the students that we serve. All of the principals from all of the elementary schools that we share these students. I don't feel like they're just my students. That's why I'm a co-principal. So the partnerships that we have with my elementary colleagues are a big part of our celebration, as well as our PL team, Eric Haynes, Dr. Cuppett. They're a big part of the team as well, helping with our ALP sessions. Eric's been helpful with getting some of our newer teachers up and running with the Schoology and troubleshooting. He has office hours to help our staff. We have Kristen Canning, our director, and her team who helped put all those resources and materials together. I don't see a picture there, but I do believe she was on her floor one Friday night cutting out ABC tiles in Velcro and putting them into manila envelopes. So we've got to give a shout out to Kristen and all of the folks down there on her floor for helping and cutting. Certainly Centerville and Deer Crossing buildings and custodians and staff for helping us. Those are our space where we're housed, and we appreciate them. We do have Dr. Lippy and Jamie Alavito and the directors. We do have bi-weekly support meetings with that team. And so that's definitely a celebration, having those folks knowing that they've got our back and they're supporting us in this new innovative approach. And of course, we would be amiss not to thank our tech department, because we are a virtual program, so we need technology to be up and running. So some celebrations with all of our partnerships that we have as well. A few of the challenges, just to touch base a little bit on, when we look at the numbers there that Dr. Saunders just shared with us, this program was developed because we had children last spring that were doing exceptionally well in a virtual environment. So those were the families that we were targeting, families who knew that their children were exceeding, families that were doing well in a virtual environment, families that were innovative and available to support and help. And over time, with the new variant and the mask mandates, the purpose of our program kind of shifted to a COVID relief, so to speak. Families were choosing our program because they didn't want their child to go to school because of a mask mandate or because of the new variant. And so although we had a targeted population, it did switch over time. And that has been a little bit of a challenge, because there are a few of our families who are struggling in the virtual environment because they're families that didn't choose this for the reason that this program was developed. So I think that that's important for the BOE to know, that we do have some challenges with the families that are currently enrolled in our program. Virtual learning is not for every student. It's not for every teacher, and it's not for every administrator. So there's got to be this buy-in and this expectation in order to be successful in a virtual environment, that we can make it work and be the most successful environment for children. And with that being said, it's a virtual environment is tough for our youngest learners. Our K and our 1 students do struggle with that engagement piece. Not all of them, but virtual learning, again, does have its challenges, because some of the students that are currently enrolled are not the students that would necessarily have been the most successful if we could rewind and go back to thinking about how this program came to fruition and the students that we have in the program now. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Frank and let him talk a little bit about his celebrations and challenges.
All right. Thank you very much, Kate. And good morning, everyone. I'm going to spend less time talking about celebrations because Kate really touched upon some of the key ones that I think we all share in our programs. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention, again, just how much collaboration and support was required from a multitude of district departments and offices to pull this project off. And so I just think it's really important and impressive that a system of our size was able to do that in such a short amount of time. Probably the biggest celebration, though, is the feedback that we're getting from kids and families, and also from teachers. I am just so appreciative and so thankful because many students, this program resonates with them. They're engaged, they're excited, they're participating in deep learning experiences, and our teachers have done a great job of building community and connecting kids. And I think that was probably the one fear that some of us had going into a virtual school is, can we still build human connection? Can we still make kids feel welcome and loved and cared for? And we're doing that, and I'm really proud of that, and again, thankful. again, evidence of strong instructional practices exist. And so I feel like we're doing great things for kids, and that's ultimately what we want. And again, this comes from feedback from families, from students, and teachers. My teachers as a whole, collectively, are really excited about the work that they're doing. They feel like they're at the forefront of something special, and that sense of community, even though we're not in the same building together, is really, really important and is vital for the long-term success of this program. Some of the challenges, I would say probably the biggest challenge we face right now is because of the amount of time that we had to submit this program to the state, we decided to use the traditional middle school schedule. And one of the reasons why families liked the virtual option last year is because we didn't use a traditional schedule. There were fewer periods each day. They were longer, so you could spend more time going in depth, but kids weren't overwhelmed being on screen for too long. Plus, we had support blocks woven in. And we recognized the need to kind of innovate and adapt our program going forward. District leadership has been very open and encouraging about exploring new options. And so we're looking at some tweaks going forward this year, and then again are exploring some long-term solutions for next year and on. I'd say, at the middle school level, a couple of other sort of challenges is that there are certain courses that just aren't conducive to virtual learning. Some of the performing arts classes, we're not providing them. And so for some families, that was a disappointment that we couldn't provide a virtual band experience. In some cases, though, I have been able to connect kids with their home schools and work it out in their schedule. They actually could go into their home school to participate in band and then get online with us. And so that's been good. And I would say, although we have evidence of many kids being successful, there are some kids who are struggling. And in the virtual environment, it can be easy to hide. It can be easy to turn off your camera, to give the impression that you're actually attending class. Sometimes I talk with parents and they say, I know my students online all day. And my retort is, I'm sure they're on their computer, but they're not necessarily participating in class, and we actually have evidence of that. So for some of our struggling learners, this may not be the best option. So as we reflect upon who's being successful, who's not, that'll help us to make better decisions going forward about who really can be successful and should participate in this program. So again, I thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this, and I'm going to turn it over to Mike Watson now.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Good to be here. Thanks for having us, for the opportunity to share. I'll try not to overlap some of the celebrations that were previously shared by Frank and Kate, but I think I do need to point out that the fact that this program is up and running is a key to celebration. If you look at other counties across the state, they were not able to pull this off. And while it was a heavy lift over the summer with the time frame that we had, we are doing it. And as Frank and Kate have mentioned, we have a lot of students who are experiencing some success. I think the key for us, like Kate kind of mentioned, is that, we're providing an alternative option for students to engage in their schooling and give them some choice in how they do that. And that's kind of been one of the things that's always been a big proponent for me as we look at virtual options for students. A big shout out to, people across the county, from curriculum to helping us design courses, provide feedback to teachers, provide professional learning to staff to be prepared for day one. And then also at the high school level, I have to give some credit to homeschool counselors and registrars who really helped us with the scheduling process over the summer. The high school scheduling process is a whole different animal compared to elementary and middle. And we were limited with some of the courses that we could provide. So their support over the summer was beneficial in us getting students schedules that they needed and met their high school graduation requirements. I do want to point out, I want to give you some specific examples of some celebrations that I'm seeing as I'm observing classrooms. I've really encouraged teachers to take risk. I want to see them challenging students to engage, to deep level thinking as well. I'm seeing teachers use breakout rooms more often. During those breakout rooms, I'm seeing other students leading the instructional process. So they're kind of the leader of that group. They're keep facilitating the learning, which is really cool to see with all cameras on, all students participating. I heard a student the other day, he didn't realize his microphone was still on, as many of us do sometimes. And he was commenting as he came out of a breakout room. You could hear him saying to someone in his family, like, I'm finally making friends and meeting students from other places. And it was just like heartwarming to hear that we are providing those connections for students. And we're unique in that we're pulling students from all across the county into the same classrooms at once. Our teachers are providing brain breaks to provide opportunities for students to have a break from the screen. They're providing asynchronous opportunities. So again, to provide breaks from the screen. I had our health teacher the other day actually encourage students to take a nature walk outside with their device. And there were some students who couldn't, but they walked around the room, but he was trying to get them up and moving out of this same space that they're sitting, sometimes for multiple hours a day. And they were just talking. And it was amazing to see how many more students participated in the conversation when they were up and moving around. So it was really cool to see students do that. And then I recently saw an English teacher who collaborated with one of our high school media specialists to do a book tasting. And she's also planning a virtual author visit. So it's cool to see teachers taking some risk and finding new ways to engage students. So I think we really have to celebrate the risk that they're taking and kind of, trying this new opportunity. I think there was some risk on, applying for these positions, but they're certainly taking advantage of those opportunities. Challenges, at the high school, it's scheduling. I think when you look at that data about the projected enrollment and our actual enrollment, you see a big discrepancy. And mainly that's because we're not able to offer all the high school course options, either because they're not appropriate for a virtual environment, like ceramics maybe, or some of our CTE courses, or we're just not able, we don't have the staff to offer those sections. So for example, dual enrollment courses require our teachers to have a different skill set to be able to be certified by FCC to teach dual enrollment courses. So when we were planning over the summer, we didn't know if any of our staff had those credentials. So we were unable to offer dual enrollment courses. So those have been kind of the biggest challenges for scheduling. And then also, as we have students who are waiting to get in from the wait list, trying to match their schedule exactly because we have so few options has been a challenge to meet those needs of students. Besides that, I would have to echo across levels, we've seen some students that are struggling in this environment, that it might not be the best option for them. And we've actually, at the high school level, we actually recommended some students to return to their home schools because they were not engaging, they were not participating. And so we've had some students do that and actually turn it around and show some success by going back into their buildings. But then we also have a handful who just aren't engaging that way either. And so I think, kind of improvement for moving forward. Frank mentioned maybe an alternative schedule. I think that's something we'd like to explore at the high school level as well. Do we need to follow a traditional high school schedule from 7:15 to 2:30, or excuse me, 7:30 to 2:15? We don't have as much time to provide individual support opportunities for students because we are following a traditional schedule. So I think Kate kind of mentioned and Frank mentioned that I think some families signed up for this thinking it was going to be a virtual learning experience similar to last year, where we had less instructional time with teachers, but more support time for individual students. And we just don't have that with our current schedule. So I'd like to explore some alternative scheduling options to see if we can provide that for students moving forward. I think that's it for right now.
So thank you so much. And at this point, Dr. Cuppett, I will open it up for questions and see if there's anything that, well, open it up for questions.
Mr. Johnson, Ms. Johnson?
Oh, thank you. I'll jump in. I want to thank you all for just, honestly answering the call. As you mentioned before, this started up in August, and we had it like early. It started up in August. We had it just summertime to get it set up, and there was a huge demand for different reasons, and we were able to provide it. One thing we would tell parents that it was a yes. You offered a lot of yes to our families and communities. So thank you for that. I know it has always been the best case scenario, and there's definitely been challenges that you're mentioning, but you offered a great big yes. And so a lot of students were actually able to engage in school at all this year because of what you've done. So I thank you for that. I know it's been a big lift. I'm just thinking right now about how we can best support you. So I'd like to hear from you, like things that I know that there was some of the things you wish you could have, but is something that you can think of that's kind of functional that we could do for you, or send you away to support you in what you're doing, because this is a great need, and we're not sure, unfortunately, with the times we're living in, where the need will come. Whether I imagine going for at least maintain, if not grow. But what do you need to be your best and to take your students to the next level? I hear mentions about being able to offer different courses. Maybe we're trying to recruit as much as possible for teachers in general, but to add more skills to your purview. But I just want to thank you all for what you're doing. And and just want to know what can we do to help you out.
Frank, I see your hand, so if you want to address that question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question, Mr. J. It's good to hear from you. So I would say that one important thing is a dedicated technology help desk would be really helpful. And I know that there's a cost requirement to that, but our students can't engage in learning at all if they have tech issues. And so that's something that I think maybe we want to consider going forward.
Dr. Alavito, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to add and let Mr. J know that because we have our every couple week meetings, we get to hear a lot about what our co-principals need and what would be helpful to them. And thank you, Frank, for bringing up that very specific staffing that we do feel is needed. But I wanted you all to know as well that we are, generally speaking, currently evaluating the staffing that we allocated to the BVP program and determining if that's the appropriate staffing for our next iteration. You heard the principals talk about potential shifts in schedules and then other supports that might be needed. So for example, we didn't provide academic specialists to the blended virtual program in our initial year, but we do believe that that may be something that will be appropriate moving forward. So aside from a thorough evaluation of staffing and listening to what they feel they need, we also are talking about budget. And working with the budget office, we knew that at the stage in the game that this occurred, we didn't allocate explicit budgets to the blended virtual program. We said, you tell us what you need, we'll look for those monies. And then later had to carve out some budget. So we will absolutely, there's a huge opportunity going into the planning for next school year with all of the months and all of the same processes that we use for other programs to apply to the blended virtual program, which will include budget, staffing, and all of those pieces. So we're looking forward to, I think, the next iteration of the blended virtual program.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for that question. Any other questions?
I do. Thank you so much. I know it's got to be such an effort to stand up a new program, and listening to your reflections. I'm wondering, in terms of that hindsight, what do you think you wish you knew then that you know now? So that will help me think about going forward in terms of ways that we as a board can help continue to support. But I'm really curious to know, what is it you wish you knew then that you know now?
Mike, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, I think I wish I would have known we would have been in a national teacher shortage. I think that was that's probably been the biggest obstacle over the summer, was just kind of being in that, that position where it's struggling to find teaching staff, support staff. Now that we can kind of, as Jamie alluded to, we can kind of get into a more standardized scheduling process and staffing model. We'll have the opportunity, if we have vacancies for moving forward, the opportunity to put positions on the open transfer request, so that if teachers would desire to come teach in this program, they would now have the opportunity to do that. I think some teachers last spring, when we advertised, were reluctant because it was new. They didn't know how much stability there might be. And, we had just gone through a rough, challenging year, and kind of, in June, making the decision to leave somewhere where I'm comfortable and try something brand new with no guarantees. I think we struggled to find internal staff who might have been interested in doing that. I think that will be drastically different moving forward, as people kind of see this program grow and evolve, and what some of the benefits that come with it as well. So, and that's something that none of us could control. And I think the other thing that was the biggest challenge, it was just the timeline. I don't think any of us on the screen would say, if we're going to develop a new virtual program, we would say, let's start it in June. So, but that was out of our control. So I think we did, with the supports from central office, and HR was, phenomenal over the summer, kind of finding candidates for us. It was a big lift, and like, I'm really proud that we were able to pull it off. But that was something, those are two elements that were kind of out of our control, but I think we've learned a lot from it. And I think it will guide us kind of as we move forward into year 2. Because we're already planning now for staffing, for students, for scheduling process. So we got a much better start this year than we did last year.
Frank, what are those lessons that you've learned that you wish you knew?
Well, I would say is that we want all students to learn, right? We want to be successful with all students. And so when we created this program, we intentionally cast a wide net. We weren't looking to exclude students. We welcomed all comers. And I think now we recognize that there are certain students who just maybe aren't right for this type of program. And so I wish I'd had a better sense. I'm not sure I would have done anything differently, because I do think that, ultimately we want to give kids a chance. We want to give families opportunities. That's what we're about. But having a better understanding of who might be successful, I think, is going to be important, because we could have that conversation with families and say, look, based on what we've known, there are some factors that may be hindrances to your child being successful. So this way they can make a more informed decision too.
Love that. Kristen, did you want to add something?
Sure. Thanks, Tom. And it's exciting to kind of hear this recap. It's fun to be part of newness and innovation. But one of the things I think that we learned a little bit later in the game that we will implement earlier in our search for high quality teachers, really, we didn't have to impose boundaries on ourselves. So we were able to look out of state to hire teachers. Like, we're a virtual program. And so that was new to us. And at first, I think we hesitated at thinking of that because we've never done that before. Now, we did that. We've seen success with that. And especially in the midst of what we all recognize as a national teacher shortage, there are some very high quality candidates who are very interested in an innovative program like ours. They don't have to live in Frederick, right? We can recruit on a wider scale, and we can really bring in some talent from much further out. And so I'm excited about our hiring season to come. Mike said we're already thinking about that. So as we start to seek out candidates, we can really be much more thoughtful about where we're looking and broaden that as we're staffing moving forward.
And I'd just like to, oh, sorry, Tom, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Ms. Johnson. Go ahead. And then Dr. Alavito is next. Go ahead, Ms. Johnson.
Well, I was just going to follow up with that. From a personal anecdote, I did take an oceanography class at FCC amongst some other courses, and that professor was based out of Tennessee, who, is an online class, and she worked from Tennessee. So it was interesting, thinking, well, my instructor is nowhere near, but the course was fine. One thing, again, I brought this up earlier, and from me in a personal perspective, is I do want us to have our best and brightest for the virtual model in this program. And in terms of investment, and to help ensure that we can have this kind of level of engagement that you're going to need in this kind of program, has anyone done a cost breakdown of the per pupil cost, given that we don't have the same kind of overhead with transportation, custodial staff, food service workers, and can that be diverted to things like technical support? And like, who's been doing the thinking behind that? Sorry if I'm asking a question that you all know an answer to and I don't.
Susan, Ms. Johnson, that's a great question. And the budget office does take the lead on cost per pupil. And to my knowledge, they have not done that yet. And that is because this is being treated as a program versus a school. And so far, all of the cost per pupil data has been by school. Knowing now that we do want to allocate budget monies to these programs and staffing much more like we do a school, I think that's a great question for Heather Claybaugh in our budget office, and I will pass that along to her. And then, Tom, the only other thing that I was going to add about what I didn't know then that I do know now is that I think there's going to be great oversight by the State Department. And sometimes we're ahead of them on things. And so it took them a bit of time to get a group together to have oversight of the blended virtual program. And so Mike Watson and I serve as points of contact with the state for the existing Frederick County Virtual School, as well as now the new blended virtual program. And there's great interest about these programs at the state level. There are 9 new data collections that they have imposed on local school systems to be able to evaluate the success of students in these programs across the state. And so I definitely want, I know Jen Bingman's on the call, I want our own research and evaluation team to be prepared to evaluate the success of students using our own methods and considerations versus just what the state output may be. And I think what we don't know is, we're moving forward planning to have this program next year because we think it's an innovative program. And I'm not sure at what point the state may direct us otherwise. And so that's just an unknown that we're going to be keeping an eye on as we have our weekly or monthly meetings with MSDE.
And Dr. Alavito, that brings up legislation, not just MSDE and the state board, but what will the legislators in Annapolis do as they have tried to do things before? So being on the MABE legislative committee, that is definitely an area, that I will keep an eye out for. And Ms. Johnson also serves on that committee. So we'll keep tabs on that for sure, and follow anything, because that could make or break us. And basically, again, we look for local control, especially when we're doing good things. So, and you answered really all of my questions. So bravo. And it's very exciting and always wonderful when we're doing things, again, for students too, because we know not one thing works for every student. So trying to hit them all. And Ms. Kreitz, I know you're familiar with staff not being sure, do I stay, do I go, what's going to happen next year? So yeah, I think that I know as a teacher myself formerly, consistency, predictability goes a long way to job satisfaction. So, all right, anything else there? Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. Great presentation. And I think we're ready for our career tech people.
Yeah, so those folks that present with blended virtual, you're free to leave the meeting and roam the planet and do other good things for kids while we bring on our career and technical education group. I did want to introduce Dr. Christine Pearl. She's our supervisor of career and technical education. Also joining her, if necessary today, are Norm McGackey. Yeah, Mr. McGackey is there, and Corbin Shoemaker. Mr. McGackey serves as our coordinator for career and technical education, and Corbin is our technology teacher specialist. So, Christine, I'll turn it over to you so you can talk a little bit about some exciting work in CTE.
Very good. Thank you so much. And so, as you are aware, especially Ms. Yoho, that there is a lot of legislation surrounding the Maryland Blueprint, and of course, graduation requirements were recently changed last year. So the two courses that we are first starting with that we're bringing you today are new iterations of previous courses with the attempt to make sure that we are aligned to the new legislation. So Norm is going to start off first by talking about our new course, which will meet the graduation requirement for the new computer science and engineering.
All right, thank you. Corbin and I have actually been working on this course and brainstorming about a year. We could have implemented it last year, but we really wanted to hold off because last year was a difficult year. Not sure if you're aware of that, but we're really glad we did. And the new course is going to be one of the options for the computer science and engineering credit, and it's going to be called Engineering Design and Applications. And it's really going to, really what's morphed together in this, about 70% of the curriculum is engineering, but about 30% you'll see is computer science and computational thinking. And these two areas really align. And we are totally revamping this course. So the curriculum that we currently use will not be utilized. So it's going to be a brand new course with new resources and tools. And you can see, you know, in the course description, it's really problem solving, computational thinking, CAD, computer aided design, basic computing concepts. And so we're going to have the hands-on, but this course is really going to move into more of the digital processes and skills, not just creating or building something. So, and we have seen, we actually had a person, you know, a student could take Foundations of Computer Science for this course, and we had a person say, well, which one's easier? Well, neither one. We want to be easy. We want the students to be engaged in it, to be effective. And we've had a lot of success with some tools that we're going to utilize in this course, which is Onshape for the CAD drawing, and we're actually going to use some computational thinking tools as well. So that's basically the overview of the course. If anybody has any questions, I mean, we're excited about it, and we're going to provide our teachers training, of course, and everything for next year. We're going to test it out at a few schools in the spring.
I know Mr. Johnson has to leave soon. Do you have any questions for our career tech people, Mr. Johnson?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I had to stay longer because this is my jam right here.
Right.
Thank you so much for what you guys do. I had a question in the course. Are they going to do block or text coding?
We're going to use microbits. You've seen those, right?
Yeah.
That's what our goal is. We're going to use microbits, but we'll provide some flexibility, but we want this to be able to taught virtually, hybrid, face-to-face. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Onshape. Either Corbin has worked a tremendous amount with that, and that is one of the, Onshape is the only product that's really designed. It's a platform built from scratch using the latest cloud and web and mobile technologies, really to provide even collaboration in a CAD environment. So there's going to be a lot of computational thinking in this course. That's what we're excited about.
Okay.
So yeah, the microbit both has block text, Python, so we can vary that depending on the level of the students, because you know with this course you're going to have a vast array of experiences. And that's what we, just as we did the Edison blocks this summer, with the middle school, they can, do those different types of, you can code in Python or block coding. So that works so well that's sort of the approach we want to take with this.
Excellent. And there's one more question. Thank you so much for engaging in this. Where do you see students progressing after this course?
You know what? I think we had a 10% growth in computer science again last year. And I think the students, and Corbin has talked to some teachers, even in the wood design and applications, that have had so much success using tools like Onshape, or the success we had this summer with the Edison bots, that I think more students will choose that pathway of computer science as a result of this, because they saw success with it, and that they can do it. So that's what we're hoping for, to make that bubble expand more and get more students into computer science.
Yeah, I was just curious about what particular course is set up to catch these. So they had this course and they're interested. What's the next course they'd be recommended to take afterwards?
They'd probably go to the AP, Computer Science Principles.
Okay. Great stuff.
Yeah. Or they could go into an engineering pathway. So.
Thank you all very much.
Okay, are you ready for the next course? Okay, so the next one that we are requesting permission to add is the intro. I actually wrote it as Intro to College and Careers, but once I posted it, I had a great suggestion from someone that why don't we make it Intro to Careers and College? Because as Dr. Robin often says, everyone eventually has a career. Some people choose to go to college and some people choose to go right to the workforce. But this course, again, due to legislative changes, aligns to the recently updated Maryland Career Development Framework. It has a better focused, defined financial literacy component, and it aligns to our Career Research and Development Program of Study. And the added benefit of that is that for those particular courses, anyone with any CTE certification can teach, which again, at a time with teacher shortages, that's definitely a benefit. So, and of course, as Norm said with his other, with the new course that he referenced, we will be offering teacher training during the summer so that our teachers can teach this course with efficacy, because it will be offered throughout Frederick County Public Schools and all high schools.
And, Dr. Pearl, I know financial literacy is embedded in a lot of different courses. And we constantly hear, this is the legislature and public sometimes saying, we need a standalone financial literacy course. It ought to be a graduation requirement. I understand that completely. It's a very practical life skill. And I saw somewhere in there kind of life skills going on. But we're so hesitant to add it as a graduation requirement, because then, what else, how else do you fill the day? But it's nice to see that, it's a standout in this, because I do have this feeling that sometimes when we embed things, students are not always aware that that is what they're being taught. That's just my experience, but I wouldn't want to fight about it, but sometimes you have to say, this is what we're teaching you, so that they are totally aware of it. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Now, both of these courses are designed to take the place of existing courses. So further down in the document, it lists courses that staff is recommending for discontinuation, and that includes the Foundations of Technology as well as Independent Living. Again, the courses have been revised, and so these courses will take their place. Now, lastly, I'd like to share that through a collaborative conversation, we are also recommending the dissolution of the Transition Skills Program. And so Kathleen Schlappel, Dr. Chambers, and Mike Concepcion are here to address any questions that you have related to that course. So I'm going to ask those folks to come on. And what was determined was that this particular course was first developed, I believe, 20 or 21 years ago. And at this time, it no longer meets the intended purpose, in that we understand that special ed now has programs to meet the same need in our comprehensive schools.
Okay. Any questions at this point? Okay. So, Ms. Yoho, those things will be forwarded for full board approval at not this meeting, but the next meeting then? Okay.
Good. I was just, I was going to ask when,
Yep.
does that also go with the social studies, Black African American studies? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. We'll move it all forward for consent agenda for the next meeting, 27th.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, I think when you first see a discontinuation of something like transition skills, you go, what? Or, you know, any of them. But then once you hear the explanation, it's just so obvious. And anybody that knows educators know that you all don't just sit in your office and do whatever. You are constantly thinking. That's just the good teachers in you, the reflection, what's working, what's not working, and doing what's best for students. And anybody that thinks that people don't spend their time, their days doing that, as well as dealing with a lot of other things, needs to come shadow you. Or not really, just I don't want to do that to you. Mr. McGackie.
Yeah, just one quick point on the financial literacy that you might be able to get this out into the community. Even though we have financial literacy embedded in the courses, we have specific products now, like the market challenge or the budget challenge is specifically in our personal principles of finance and accounting, and our principles of business management entrepreneurship specifically has EverFi. A lot of teachers do what's called Financial Friday, and I can even track the data to see what students are in there. We are also looking at a new one called the Personal Finance Lab, where it's a budgeting and a stock market game. So it's more than just embedded. We're actually using tools to specifically, but giving kids even multiple financial experiences, not just one. So just so you're aware.
Mr. Johnson?
So a quick question. I'm so glad about the, I know what you're doing is changing over in FOT. It was time to have that kind of migrate to something better. So I'm so glad, I actually really glad to hear that. I taught FOT. So I think it was time for an upgrade. Just a question in the same vein as like transitions and life skills. Is there anything for like, are taxes included in that at all? Oh, they are? Cool.
Absolutely. All of our financial literacy programs have real world financial situations, scenarios. Norm, do you want to speak a little more to that?
Yeah, they usually involve like 8 or 9 major concepts. And like I said, we try to embed it because students might take multiple business classes. That's where some of it's found. So we have different programs and we're hitting different areas. Or a student might just take one and we want to make sure those key concepts are hit. So they're hit in all the courses, which is, I think, the most important thing we can teach a student in high school is how to manage their money.
Absolutely. And hopefully we can teach them about, and I'm sure investing there and everything like that. It's wonderful. I'll take my leave at this time. I thank you all so much for presenting. And I'm so glad to hear of the upgrades and the changes. As Ms. Yoho said, that education is reflective. You go back and you improve. So I'm glad to hear that that's happening, both at our level and on state level. Thank you all so much.
And Mr. Concepcion, I'm going to get over to Career Tech Center. I want to see the teacher Maryland Teacher Academy in action, because the last time I visited, they were not there that day. So I need to set up a time. And can you tell us when the open house, either Dr. Pearl or Mr. Concepcion, when the open house for the CTC is coming up, I think?
Yes, we are scheduled to have an open house on October the 28th from 6 to 8 p.m. here in our building. So we look forward to maybe seeing you there. And just as a side note, Mrs. Yoho, the Teaching Academy of Maryland folks, the level 2 kids who are currently out on internship placements, they will be in our building kind of holding a regroup meeting on the 20th of October. So if you wanted to stop by in the afternoon, that might be a great time for you to not only see the program, but to hear feedback on how the year is going for our interns.
I will check with you on time. I am serving lunch at Lincoln Elementary that day. So if I get done in time there, I will be over to see that. Thank you. Anything, Ms. Johnson, do you have anything?
I just have a question in terms of how we obtain our instructors for these technical programs. Even, I'm thinking financial literacy, but just in my area at FCC, a lot of, I'm wondering, like with engineering, our folks that taught anything engineering came from engineering backgrounds, not teaching backgrounds. So do you have to be a certificated teacher to teach things like, I was looking at Onshape, and that's similar to SolidWorks, and these aren't things that we typically at FCC find people have a teaching background in, but have an engineering background in. How do we handle that in the FCPS?
Can I jump in for that one? There are 2 different types of certification. In addition to the teaching certification, we also have a professional technical certification, which allows us to take folks from the outside world, give them credit for time served within their industry, and brings them right into the classroom. Now, we typically only use that type of certification at the Career and Tech Center, but in recent years, we have branched out. MSDE, seeing a teacher shortage, has allowed us to place teachers with the PTE certification in our comprehensive high schools as well. So yes, we have people coming directly from industry, as well as people that are coming from teacher education programs. I think the complex issues that you're describing are the exact reason why professional development is so important in CTE. So we also, on the statewide level, there are many trainings that are provided by MSDE or their industry partners. And probably more than any other content, we are using Perkins funds to send all of our teachers to these trainings so that they're updated within their specific content area. And with that, I'm not sure if Mr. Concepcion wants to chime in on anything else.
The only thing I would add is that they have to have some experience in the industry in order to qualify for the conditional certificate to get a professional teaching educator's certificate.
Okay. Thank you.
I was afraid we were cutting you all short because we've run long on some of the other ones. So thank you for the updates and always interesting things going on in career tech education at the CTC. And, I think every board member is in most of the ones, at least that I've talked to, they have in mind that we would love to expand that program and be able to serve more students. And the one concern that's come up with the blueprint is we're now looking at board certified teachers that are going to get an additional $10,000. And if they work in a high risk school, as our board defines it, that yet to stay tuned, they'll get an additional $7,000. And then just teacher salaries in general. Well, there's a lot of money there from the state and right now for the blueprint. But if we end up having to put all of the money in the salary basket, are we going to be able to do the pre-K, which has its own issues with public-private partnerships and all the ones that have closed here in Frederick in the last year with the pandemic? And then are we going to be able to do, the other areas that the blueprint calls for? Will there be enough money? That was something that came up recently at a legislative meeting. So, and that's all devil in the details, and stay tuned for how it goes. But, you know, there's a lot of good things, and we hope to be able to address them all, and it will just depend on a lot of different factors, as you all are aware. So, but we do love our Career Tech Center, and very proud of it. So, and again, all of the career tech education that goes on in all of our schools, it's just wonderful. So thank you.
Okay, Michelle, we do have some future schedule items. The next meeting, we will be doing a review of English Language Arts, pre-K through 12. We will bring a final report for the Striving Readers Comprehensive Literacy Grant and an Advanced Academics Program update.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Those show, as always, it's all interesting because every day there's so much going on in Frederick County Public Schools. So anything else, Ms. Johnson?
No, thank you everybody for all the enlightenment.
That's why I love the Curriculum Instruction Committee, always learning. So, and we are on time. Yay. Always look for that. So thank you so much, everybody. And we will see you. Yes, next month we will see you. Bye-bye.